You read Anna Karenina in school, but they didn't tell you that Tolstoy intentionally drove his wife crazy. You read Romeo and Juliet, but they hid the fact that Shakespeare lost his son and never recovered. Listen to me, because in the next few minutes I'm going to show you the horrifying truths hidden behind the school books. I chose 5 classic works. You read each one in school, but what they never told you: why Dostoevsky wrote a crime novel, why Hemingway killed himself, why Virginia Woolf was tied up with stones and thrown into the water, why Oscar Wilde died in prison, why Tolstoy ran away from his family today. You're going to learn it all. Turn off your phone. Pay attention, because this is not the literary history you know. This is the dark history. Part 1. Dostoevsky, the genius who lived with crime. The first classic, Crime and Punishment, Fyodor Dostoevsky. In school, they told you, this is the novel of conscience, about morality. Li. This is the confession of Dostoevsky's own life. At the age of 28, Dostoevsky is sentenced to death by execution. The reason? Political views. They bring him to the execution square. His eyes are blindfolded. The soldiers raise their guns. 3, 2, 1. At the last second, the Tsar gives the order, "Pardon." It was a false execution. Psychological torture. Dostoevsky goes insane there. Then he goes to prison. Siberia. 4 years. And what does he see there? Murderers. Thieves. Criminals. He lives with them. He reads their thoughts. When he gets out of prison, Dostoevsky is a different man, and he writes Crime and Punishment. A young man named Raskolnikov commits a crime. His conscience is torn apart. But this is Dostoevsky's own soul's confession. He didn't commit a crime himself, but his brain? It thought like a killer, because he lived with murderers in prison for 4 years. He learned their soul. Do they tell you this in school? No. But the truth, Dostoevsky was speaking in the language of criminals. And one more thing. Dostoevsky was a gambling addict. He'd win money. He'd lose it. He'd write a book, lose the money on gambling. His wife would beg. He'd go again. When he wrote Crime and Punishment, he was in debt. The publisher said, "If you don't finish the book, you're going to jail." Dostoevsky finished it in 26 days. In other words, a classic, a product of debt. Is this what they tell you in school? No. Part 2. Hemingway, the suicidal hero. The second classic, The Old Man and the Sea, Ernest Hemingway. In school they said, this is a novel of struggle. Man cannot be defeated. Lie. Because Hemingway killed himself. At 61. With a gun. Hemingway fought in 4 wars. World War I, Spanish Civil War, World War II, Korea. He saw death every time. His comrades died. He survived. And that destroyed him. Nightmares every night. Every sound a bomb. Every shadow an enemy. And nobody knew. Because Hemingway seemed strong. When he wrote The Old Man and the Sea, Hemingway was 52 years old. An old fisherman named Santiago hasn't caught a fish in 84 days. Everyone considers him a failure, but he says, "A man can be destroyed, but he cannot be defeated." This was Hemingway himself. He too was about to be defeated. But he was still fighting. 9 years later, he could no longer fight. July 2nd, 1961. Morning. At home, a rifle, 1 shot. Santiago said, "He cannot be defeated." Hemingway defeated himself. And the most terrifying part? The Hemingway family. 5 people committed suicide. Father, 1928, by gun Hemingway. 1961, by gun brother. 1966, by overdose. His sister, 1996, drug overdose. His grandson, 1996, gunshot. This is not a coincidence. It's genetic depression, a family curse. Is this what they tell you at school? No. Part 3. Virginia Woolf, the woman who drowned with stones. The third classic. Mrs. Dalloway, Virginia Woolf. At school they said, modernist work, stream of consciousness, woman writer. What they didn't say, Virginia Woolf drowned herself in a river. At age 59, Virginia Woolf struggled with mental illness her entire life, bipolar disorder, manic depression. At age 6, she was sexually abused by her stepbrother. At age 13, her mother died. She went insane. At age 24, her brother died. She went insane again. 3 times in her life, she was committed to a psychiatric hospital. But she wrote. She wrote because writing did not heal her. It prevented her from healing. Virginia was 43 when she wrote Mrs. Dalloway. A woman named Clarissa Dalloway thinks about the past, present, and future in a single day. Every thought a wave, a stream of consciousness. This was inside the mind of Virginia Woolf. Chaos, confusion, unceasing thoughts. 16 years after writing Mrs. Dalloway, she could no longer go on. March 28, 1941. She filled the pockets of her coat with stones. She went to the river. She went into the water. She never came out. She wrote a final letter to her husband. My dear, I am crazy again. I can't be a burden to you anymore. I was the happiest woman. But I can't go on anymore. You gave me the most beautiful thing, life. Now I am giving it back. 2 hours after writing this letter, she hanged herself. Is this taught in school? No. Part 4. Oscar Wilde, the genius who died in prison. The fourth classic, Dorian Gray, Oscar Wilde. In school they said aestheticism, beauty, art. What wasn't told? Oscar Wilde died in prison. From rage, from poverty, from disgrace. Oscar Wilde was the most famous writer of the 19th century. Intelligent, handsome, rich, famous. But he had a secret. He was homosexual. In Victorian England, this was a crime. Wilde was in a relationship with a young man named Lord Alfred Douglas. Alfred's father, the Marquis of Queensberry, found out and sued Oscar Wilde. 1895. Trial, slander, scandal. The result? 2 years in prison. Hard labor. In prison, Oscar Wilde was destroyed. Physical labor, hunger, humiliation. Once a famous writer, now convict C.3.3, cell number. In prison, he wrote a work, De Profundis. A letter to Alfred, 50,000 words. Pain, sorrow, suffering. He writes, You destroyed me, but you are the worst thing. In my heart, I still love you. He was released in 1897, but he was no longer Oscar Wilde. He went to France, took a different name, hid, died 3 years later. Poverty, alone, forgotten. They wrote on his tomb, and from him, despite his hopeless, wicked age, a lamb kissed. Oscar Wilde went from fame to prison. Dorian Gray grew old from youth. Both were destroyed. But with one difference. Dorian Gray was a novel. Oscar Wilde was real. Do they tell you this in school? No. Part 5. Tolstoy, the old man who ran away from his family. The fifth classic, Anna Karenina, Leo Tolstoy. In school they said, the great Russian novel, family, love. What they didn't say, Tolstoy ran away from home at 82, from his wife, from his family, from everything. Tolstoy and his wife, Sophia, were married for 48 years, 48 years of war. Tolstoy, world-famous writer. Sophia, crazy wife. What was Sophia doing? Reading his diary, Tolstoy's personal thoughts. Looking through his letters, listening to his guests secretly. She would scream, plan, threaten. Tolstoy couldn't stand it, but he didn't leave, because he was famous. Image. October 1910. Tolstoy, at 82, decides, enough is enough. He gets up in the middle of the night, packs his suitcase, sneaks out of the house, leaves a note. Don't look for me. I'm leaving. His wife, Sophia, wakes up in the morning. She sees the note. She goes crazy, throws herself into the pool. Servants save her. Tolstoy? He gets on a train. He goes somewhere. 7 days later, he gets sick at a small train station. A cold, pneumonia. His wife arrives. Tolstoy says, "Don't let her in." November 7th, 1910. Tolstoy dies. At the station master's house, his last words, "To run away, one must run away." Tolstoy wrote Anna Karenina. Anna threw herself under a train to run away from her husband. Tolstoy got on a train to escape his wife. The difference, Anna failed. Tolstoy was free in the last days of his life. Do they say this in school? No. 5 classic writers. 5 horrifying truths. Dostoevsky lived with murderers for 4 years. Hemingway committed suicide. Virginia Woolf drowned herself with stones. Oscar Wilde died in prison. Tolstoy ran away from his family. In school, they made you read the books, but they didn't tell you about the authors, because the truth is a little too dark. So what does this mean? The classics are bad? No, the classics are more precious, because there is suffering behind them. Dostoevsky didn't write easily. He suffered. Hemingway didn't write easily. He saw death in battles. Woolf didn't write easily. She struggled with insanity. Every classic work is someone's blood, tears, and life. If they taught this in school, you would see a classic differently. Now you know. Share. Was this video helpful? Like, subscribe. I reveal a new secret every week. Leave a comment. Which classic writer do you want to learn about? Next video. Shakespeare's son's death and Hamlet. Thanks for watching. Remember, classics are born from darkness.